that we need change in this nation. But in the context of discussion about what can we get from his example, he lived under certain conditions, certain political and social realities. What was his response and what is our response? So I ask myself when I go vote in the primaries in May, when I look at excerpts from the debate that was held in Texas tonight, when I go to vote in November and I cast my ballot, am I doing this thinking that I have the opportunity to change fundamentally, radically, all of the things that are going wrong in this world? Everything that is going wrong in the United States will be changed through my ballot. Malcolm, in reference to the ballot, was known to, he gave a very famous speech called The Ballot or the Bullet. And one of the things in discussion about just electoral politics, Malcolm says that you can't just, and this was not in the speech, but it was in discussion about it, that when you have a target and you have a gun and you have bullets, you can't just take your bullets and throw in any direction. Or you can't just shoot at something and not have a target. In order for anything to work, you have to have a target. You have to have an agenda. And so Malcolm is saying that even when you exercise your human right of franchise, that what we must do is to have an agenda. Just don't think that by voting alone that there will be systemic changes and fundamental changes throughout the political spectrum here in this country. And so I want to end by reminding myself and reminding you that you and I need to know and to understand our history. I don't want to bust anybody's bubble, because you're in one of the most prestigious universities in the country. It's a very prestigious university. And to have a degree from this university is a significant accomplishment. It will bode you well into the future. But I don't want to bust your bubble. But I don't want you to not be a student of history, because Malcolm has said that history will reward your efforts, that if you take the time to look into the history, then you will have a clearer, illumined path for your present and your future. Let me just give maybe one or two examples of what I'm talking about. Across the United States, everyone has become energized about elections and the electoral politics, as we should. But when we look at our history in this country, when we look at not the history of genocide upon which this nation was primarily built, genocide against the Native American people, genocide against the people who were brought over and forced to labor, genocide against other immigrant groups like the Chinese who were brought into the country to labor. But even when we look as recent as the 20th century and see how quickly things can change. In 1941, on February the 19th of 1941, one of the most popular presidents of the United States signed an executive order. In February the 19th, 1941. This president held office longer than any other president in the history of the country. He stayed in so long, they had amendments to the Constitution to say that no president can ever hang around as long as Franklin Delano Roosevelt hung around as the president and hung in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. What Franklin Delano Roosevelt is known for is a lot of things, but one is helping to bring this nation out of the economic doldrums that it was in, coming out of the Great Depression. That he did a lot of wonderful things for the nation. That his wife was recognized as someone that was very sensitive to the needs, particularly of African American people. But on February the 19th, 1941, in direct response to the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese against a naval base at Pearl Harbor, Franklin Roosevelt signed an executive order with just one signature on a piece of paper that caused over 120,000 Japanese Americans, most of these people American citizens, most of them had never ever even been to Japan. They were born in this country. They had gone to the universities of this country. They had built businesses in this country. They had bought property in this country, but in one sweep of a pen, they were rounded up after February the 19th, 1941, and herded into concentration camps. Their businesses were taken, their properties were taken. Many of them died inside of these concentration camps. The conditions under which they lived. And they weren't referred to as detention centers. They were referred to by Roosevelt and the federal government as concentration camps. And so I just remind myself and remind you that what Malcolm helped us to understand, to not simply put, to use an overused adage, put all of your eggs into one basket. That this idea that we can just peacefully coexist and get along without any struggle is something that has no precedent. It has no authority that can be documented and validated from our history.